wanted to record a video to mark the birthday of the United States. And I felt that I needed to do it because the United States is under attack. Now, that's nothing new. We've been under attack since the beginning. When we issued our Declaration of Independence in 1776, we were under attack by Great Britain. What's troubling this time is that we're not under attack from some external force. We're under attack from not just some internal force. We're under attack from the Democrat Party. They and their allies, academia and the media and other places, want to destroy the Republic. Now, I don't have any doubt about that. They want to politically destroy the Republic. And we ought not to be surprised. This isn't the first time this has happened. After the election of Abraham Lincoln in November 1860, southern states started leaving the Union. In December, right into April and May, they fired on Fort Sumter. Those were Democrats. And they tried to tear this country apart. And they succeeded for a while until they were eventually defeated. So this isn't maybe such a shock as you might think it is, because this has happened before. But what I want to do in this video is talk about the foundation document of the Republic, which is, in my view, one of the most misunderstood, misappreciated, maligned documents in all of United States history. Now, why do I say that the Declaration of Independence is misunderstood and misinterpreted and misappreciated? It's because I've been teaching U.S. history since the mid-1980s. For those of you who are slow at math, that's, 35 years. That's a long time. And I've seen it because I have to teach about the Declaration of Independence. And I know that students don't understand it. They know a few phrases here and there, but they don't understand why it was issued, what it was intended to do. And much of what they do know is just portrayed as, hypocrisy, especially when it comes to, all men are created equal, and various interpretations like that. So what I want to do is put the Declaration in a proper historical context. If you want to understand the Declaration, you have to understand the context in which it was issued, in which independence was declared. The Declaration of Independence was not a statement of reality on the ground at the time. And I think this becomes readily apparent when you understand the diplomacy behind the Declaration. Set aside the domestic considerations, but look at what they were trying to do with it. Why did they issue this Declaration of Independence? We were engaged in a war. The war had begun with Britain. In the earlier stages of the process leading up to the revolution, dating back to the mid-1760s, Americans in the beginning had wanted to reform, reconfigure the relationship between the colonies and the mother country, Great Britain. There had always been some, a distinct minority, who wanted outright revolution and independence. But as the years progressed, the proportion of people who wanted independence, as opposed to a reformation of the system, became stronger and stronger. This is epitomized by Thomas Paine's publication in early 1776, January, of Common Sense. Now, one can argue that it was Paine who sold hundreds of thousands of copies at a time when the population was very small. It was, by today's definition, a bestseller. He would be at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. #1 on Amazon. Some people think that it was his book that changed the American mind. It possibly did. Others would interpret it as a reflection of the changing American mind that he just was sort of documenting. We don't really know. What we do know is about that time things started to change. And by the time you get to July, most of the patriots, the people pushing the revolutionary fervor in the country, were beginning to seek independence. The problem they had was they knew they were taking on one of the world's premier powers, and it would make their job easier, and it might ultimately mean failure or success if they had assistance from Europe. And they knew that there were many European powers, most notably France, which had just lost all its colonies and possessions in North America. They knew that these other European countries were looking for the opportunity to knock Britain down a notch. I mean, from a French point of view, there was no way, given British command of the sea, that they were going to ever recapture Canada. But if they could cause the British to lose their American colonies, that would equal up the balance of power to a great degree. So what we were trying to do in the Declaration of Independence, primarily, was to signal to the Europeans that this is no longer a fraternal quarrel between parts of the British Empire. We weren't going to reconcile with the British. We were going to seek independence. And the diplomatic import of that is we're telling the Europeans, support us. If you support us successfully and we win, we're going to leave the British Empire. You won't just be supporting us in this, argument between family members. And that's what's so important about the Declaration diplomatically. But the key here to understand is, when they issued the Declaration of Independence in July 1776, we were not independent. And they knew that. We would not be independent until September 1783, when we signed the Peace of Paris with the British, and they acknowledged our independence. So if you look at it diplomatically, right away you understand that the Declaration of Independence is not a statement of fact on the ground at the time. It's a statement of goals. We seek to become independent. And we understood that it was going to take years, and ultimately it took another 7 years, to achieve that independence. And that's what you have to keep in mind. The Declaration of Independence was a statement of goals to be achieved, not a statement of facts on the ground at the time. You have to understand the same elements are present when you come to the domestic considerations. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not meant to be a statement of fact. We're not saying that is the situation today, any more than it was the situation today that we were independent. Independence was a goal that was going to take years to achieve. The same is true of the statement about all men being created equal. They knew that wasn't true. But that was the goal they were setting for themselves. And you have to understand that after the Declaration was signed, one of the things I keep hearing from my students coming in, and I know where they get it at a high school level, is that the men who signed the Declaration of Independence were all white slave owners. And they didn't believe it, and they didn't mean it at all. And that's obviously not true. Because if you look at what happened, in some cases before and right after the Declaration of Independence, you see the states in the North getting rid of slavery. Pennsylvania gets rid of slavery. New Jersey gets rid of slavery. New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. One by one, they start eliminating slavery. Now, that doesn't happen in the southern states. So you could argue that the people who signed this thing from the South didn't mean it. Or maybe they did. They just didn't think we would get there yet. But certainly the people from the North who signed it believed it, meant it, and when they went back to their individual states, they tried to implement it as best they could. Even in the South, if you look at Jefferson, who's by today's standards, yeah, he's a racist and all this, and he drafted the thing. What did he think? If you read Jefferson, not just the Declaration, but other things he wrote, Jefferson believed that slavery was wrong. He referred to it once as having the wolf by the ears. The question wasn't that how you couldn't hold on to the wolf forever. The question was, how do you let it go? And that was the problem Jefferson had. He actually came up with a scheme to eliminate slavery over a 20-year period, but it was so cumbersome and unworkable, much like many of the other inventions that he came up with, that it just wasn't going to be tried. But Jefferson, as an individual, believed slavery was wrong and it would have to go. And I suspect there are many other people of the South who thought it was going to disappear too. It was a common thought. Slavery seemed to be on the way out. And it would have had it not been for the Industrial Revolution, the steamship, steam-powered mills, the cotton gin, all of which revolutionized Southern agriculture and slavery and led to its expansion westward. But nobody saw that coming. So when they wrote this, they most of them, not all of them for sure, but certainly the people in the North, and Jefferson, we know, did believe that slavery was wrong and it would have to end at some point. But again, it's not hypocritical in the sense that it's not meant to be a declaration of what exists at the moment. It's a declaration of goals. And we've spent our entire history trying to achieve those goals of equality. I mean, when in the age of a declaration, you had to be not only white, you also had to be, well, depending on the state, 21, 25, you had to be a landowner, you had to pay taxes. And, and over the decades, we opened up voting to an ever larger percentage of the population. I mean, blacks had the right to vote before women did. But we've done all these things. We're always trying to achieve the Declaration of Independence. I remember watching Ruth Bader Ginsburg's confirmation hearings of the Senate. And they were talking about rights. And she made a very good point that Jefferson in the Declaration doesn't just lay out 3 rights: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It says that, among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which suggests that there are other unenumerated rights, which in her view would include abortion. Now, you could argue the issue of abortion or however you want, but the point is she was making a good point. It doesn't just say these are the only 3 rights we get. There are other rights. And of course, what the Bill of Rights does is expand on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness with a list of several rights in the first 10 amendments. Some of the amendments, like the First Amendment has more than 1 right in it. So you have to look at the Declaration as a goal, a statement of goals, not a statement of facts on the ground at the time. So it's not hypocritical to say this is what we want to achieve in this country. At least the document's not hypocritical. Now, you can argue that some of the people who signed it and the people who failed to implement it in their home states became hypocrites because of that. But there's nothing inherently hypocritical in the Declaration as it is. If you look at it within the context of what it was, it's not a declaration of the situation on the ground at that moment. Yes, all men were not being treated as if they'd been created equal in the country, but we also weren't independent of Great Britain yet either. That was going to be a long struggle. And for independence, it's going to be years. For other rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it continues to this day. The other thing I often ask my students is, do they really think we would be better off in this country if the Declaration had listed things as they were? If Jefferson had instead wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all white males are created equal, that would have protected them from charges of hypocrisy down the road. Actually, what they should have said was some white males, property owners, are created equal. But we wouldn't have been better off. I mean, the fact that we stated in our founding document the goal of equality was one of the methods that the abolitionists used to attack slavery. When Lincoln is at Gettysburg in 1863 after the battle, and he begins the Gettysburg Address, what does he say? 407 years ago. That's 87 years. 87 years from 1763 is not 1789, when the Constitution went into effect. It's 1776 when the Declaration was signed. And that's the point. The Declaration was a set of goals. And what Lincoln is referencing in his fight against the South, and ultimately the fight against Southern slavery, which is ended with the passage of the amendments, that the problem with slavery is it's not in conformity with the statement of goals of a nation. That's why it's wrong. If it had said, what would Lincoln and the abolitionists have done if it had said, all white men are created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights? They wouldn't have been able to use it. Other groups along the way wouldn't have been able to use it. Women wouldn't have been able to use it. We would have been much worse off in this country if the drafters of the Declaration, in an effort to avoid charges of hypocrisy, had simply stated what the situation was at the time on the ground. But that's not what they wanted to do, because they wanted to make the thing better. They saw what they were doing as a political novel experiment. So they wanted to set hard to achieve goals, which they did, and which we've struggled with ever since. And that's a good thing. And it sickens me when I see kids come into class and start saying, they're all hypocritical, blah, 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 they're all slave owners. I mean, they really don't understand what was going on. They don't understand the times. They don't understand why the Declaration was even issued. And like I said, it's very simple if you look at the diplomacy. We were not independent in July 1776, and we would not be independent until September 1783. And that's how you have to look at the Declaration. Unfortunately, that's not what the kids are being taught in the high schools. And of course, the people teaching them in the high schools have been taught at American universities and colleges. And I know what gets taught there. I worked there for 29 years. I taught full-time and part-time for almost 4 decades. I know what they hear, because they come in and they repeat it to me. And it's usually, at best, misinterpreted. Sometimes it's even falsehood. They're very poorly educated. I was just watching a video somewhere else of people were talking about Mount Rushmore, and this guy's going around and he's interviewing all these Americans, black, brown, white. What country is Mount Rushmore in? None of them knew. Most common answer was, I think it's in China somewhere. It's over in Europe, or it's, But everybody's supposed to be outraged about Mount Rushmore. Most people don't even know, couldn't find it on a map. I mean, it's hard for people to understand how poorly educated our students are. It's very depressing to teach these students who are coming in from our high schools who know virtually nothing. I once asked a classroom of 45 students, almost all of whom had been educated in North Carolina. Some of these kids are driving around with Confederate flags and things like that. So I asked them, who was the president of the Confederacy? I had about 45 students there that day. One young woman got it right, Jefferson Davis. The most common answer I got, they had to fill out little index cards. President of the Confederacy was Abraham Lincoln. Grant was on the list, numerous replies. Sherman, the guy who burned Georgia, more people thought he was president of the Confederacy than Jefferson Davis, by about 500%. North or South, white or black, people know very little about the Declaration. I once had an African American student. I made a reference to 61, 65, the Civil War, and she came up to me and asked me what century I was talking about. Is that the 1761, 65, 1861, 65, or 1961 to 65? She didn't know. We make assumptions about what people understand and know, and it's not much. And you want to, why are people outraged about Confederate statues pulling down Ulysses S. Grant? That's why. Grant, in my class, Grant got more votes as president of the Confederacy than Jefferson Davis. So it doesn't shock me to see his statue being pulled down. People in this country aren't being taught their own history. And when they are taught their own history, they're taught a leftist version of, the glass is always, half empty. It's never half full. It's always half empty. And that's the approach they take. I see them come in. All the people signed the Declaration of Independence were white racists and slave owners. It's not true. Nobody did anything about slavery, despite the Declaration. It's not true. They don't know that slavery was outlawed. I've had students who believed it was only in 1865 that slavery was eliminated in the country. Not just in the South, in the country. They don't know. And it's so sad. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in. Because the history they know is bad history. It's warped history. It's bizarro history. And what's disgusting is it's being taught by my colleagues. And it's been like that since I was in college. In the 1970s, I had teachers like that. Everything was half empty. It's just disgusting. Anyway, we need to keep in mind what the Declaration was. It's not a statement of conditions on the ground at the moment on the 4th of July, 1776. It's a statement of our goals as a people that we need to strive for, to move toward. And that's the meaning of American history. If you like this video, leave a comment. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button so you know when I post new videos. And until the next time, I am out of here. Have a happy 4th of July.